Topic 2.5, segments, midpoints, and bisectors can be referenced with Holt, Chapter 1, Section 2, pages 15 and 16. Again, we have a definition. The midpoint is a point on a segment that is equal distance from both endpoints. The first example, like we had used before, the midpoint formula, you add the 2 points given to you, the -2 and the 9, divide by 2, gives you 7/2, 3.5. Example 2 is using some algebra expressions, but they're telling us that B is the midpoint between A and C, denoted by marks. When you see 2 marks in between, that means this section is equal to this section, A equal to BC. So when they're equal and they give you values of AB is x plus 2 and BC is 2x minus 6, the important thing here is to set them equal to each other. Set equal. Doing the algebra, you're trying to balance the equation. If it helps to put a line through where you're showing the balance. You subtract a z on both sides. Bring down the 2. This becomes a positive z minus the 6. We want the z alone, so we're going to add 6 to both sides. That makes this go away. And now you have z is equal to 8. Example 3. Find the coordinate points of the midpoint EF, where E is -2, 4, and F is 3, 1. It's always good to label them if you're trying to find the midpoint. You know you're looking at adding the 2 x's together and adding the 2 y's together separately and dividing by 2. That would give us 1/2, 0.5, 5/2, 2.5. It's always good to write it in a coordinate point, so your midpoint is 0.5 and 2.5. And sometimes it may be helpful to leave it in a fraction form too. So take a minute and pause if you need to finish filling in that topics through example 3. Let's move on. Example 4, we did one like this a while back, is that they've actually given you the midpoint. You've been given that the midpoint of AB is M. So if those are your midpoints, they're just using it, denoting it with a XM meaning midpoint, not a coordinate point, YM meaning the midpoint. So if -2 is your midpoint, then your X value that's given to you is a 3, and we don't know this one. Add the 2 X values and divide by 2. How do we get rid of this denominator? We multiply by 2 on both sides. When that takes place, this goes away, leaving you just with the 3 plus the x squared. That 2 and -2 is multiplied to become -4. You subtract 3 on both sides and get -7. So that's your x value for your coordinate point of B. Again, for the midpoint that they've given you, they've already told us that M is the midpoint is 1. So we're going to fill that in here. You're adding your 5, which is the coordinate point for A, the y value, plus a value we don't know. Divide all that by 2. Again, multiply by 2 on both sides gets rid of the denominator, leaving you with 5 plus the y. Subtract 5 on both sides and you're going to get a -3. You can actually do this graphically too. If you graph these points and look at the slope, that's another way to verify that your points are correct. If you want to put all of these 3 points on a coordinate plane graph. We might do that in an example later. Okay, segment bisector, a point, line, or plane that intersects a segment at its midpoint. So notice that this one says that B is between it doesn't mean that it's in the middle. It's just saying that it is, we're going to try to determine if it's a bisector. because if it's a bisector, then both this and this distance from A to B and B to C would be equal to each other. So I would actually show it a different way. Here's one way. You can pause and fill in this, or do an alternate way to decide if this is a bisector, which would be ignoring the fact that if AB is this expression, BC is this expression, and not really looking at AC. So take a minute and decide this one, or we can actually just see if it's a midpoint by, let's prove if these are shown to be equal, set them equal to each other. 2y plus 6 is equal to y plus 8. We could do it that way. That's not very dark. Let me go to red. You're going to, solving this equation, you would be looking for getting your variables together and your constants together. We can start by subtracting the y on both sides. That would give us 8 is equal to y plus 6. You subtract 6 on both sides, so that y is now equal to 2. Just like they did it this way, where they just combined all of these and set it equal to 20. So either way will work, but if you're checking to see if B is the bisector, you would then have to take this y equals 2, plug it back in for this y, and plug it in for this y, and see if it balances the equation and if they both end up being the same. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 plus 6 is 10. Checks out. Just like right here. 2 plus 8 is also 10. So that proves that B is the midpoint. So actually two different ways of showing this expression. You can add them all together and set them equal to the distance they gave you as AC, or set the two individual parts together and see if they end up equaling each other once you plug back in the value for y. Okay, another example. Several more. You've got, use this figure below for the example 6 through 9. They're telling us that WY bisects UV at Y. So if that's the case, you can show it with a mark. UY is congruent or equal to YV. Those would be equal to each other. So if UY is 5, then find what YV and YV and UV are. So again, UY is equal to YV, and YV is equal to 5. So if those two are equal to each other, you've got your UY plus your YV is supposed to be equal to the UV. We've already been given that if those were bisectors, that they have to be equal to each other, so they're both 5. So if they were both 5, then the whole distance all the way across, sometimes you can show it with a bracket like that, showing the whole distance across. Okay, another example. I don't know why these UVs, UYs is getting a little confusing. Why didn't they just say A, B, C? Okay, UY is this expression, and YV is X. So what do we know? Since the marks show that those are equal to each other, you're going to set it as 4x minus 3 is supposed to be equal to x. By definition of bisector, that creates two equal parts, the UY and the YV. Solving for this, you're going to subtract an x. Just to keep it positive, we'll do it this way. Subtract an x. That's going to be a 3x minus 3 is equal to 0. So 3x would be equal to 3. Divide by 3. And so your x is going to be equal to 1. Okay, if x is equal to 1, then that's my distance from here to here. So this distance has to also be 1. So you're going to have to plug that x into this equation, 4x minus 3. So 4 times the 1 minus the 3 would also be, I'm sorry, that one's going to be 4 minus 3 is also going to be 1. So you got the answer that both of them are 1. So UV is the total distance across, so that's going to be the 1 plus 1. So your answer for UV would be equal to 2. We're looking at V if you want to box your answers here. UV is the whole distance across. Be careful here. UV is giving me the total distance, and so it's made up of its two parts. So you have 9 plus the YV is equal to the 18. So subtract 9 on both sides, and the YV, which is what they're asking for, is going to be 9. Yeah, one last one. Again, they've given us the whole distance as x plus 6, and uy is one of the distance, x minus 1, but we know that if it takes 2, we've been multiplying that by itself, or I'm sorry, adding it by itself each time here because we know those distances are the same. So where this is a little tricky, you can take that value of uy and double it. Show that with a different color. Why? Because x minus 1 would be here, and x minus 1 would also be here. So you really have two of them. Multiplication is probably the easiest way. Just remember that you have to distribute, if I'm going to put a parenthesis there, so that this becomes x plus 6 is equal to 2x minus 2. Combine like terms, and we'll subtract an x on both sides, so that this becomes x minus 2 is equal to 6, and x would be equal to 8. Okay, again, remember you're not finished when you just get x equal to 8, because notice how they're showing both of the partial and the full UV are shown with expressions that have addition and subtraction. So if I'm trying to find what YV is, that's the part that's equal to this one. So you're just going to take that 8, subtract 1, and so YV is equal to 7. Put a box around. Ignore these page numbers. And that is the end of topic 2.5.